So today we're going to talk about what do we do with those scraps that we have, 2.5-inch squares in particular, to make this really unique, interesting pattern here. Hi, I'm Roberta from Quilt Crafters Corner, and I love new ideas and techniques, and I love it even more sharing them with you. So I want to thank everybody for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. It's free and it really does help me out. Also, in the description below, there is a link to my quilt design checklist. Go get your copy. That way you have it on your cutting table and you can kind of check off those ideas that you've been working on. So this is a really simple, easy pattern to do. And it's 2.5-inch squares. And look at the lovely statement that it makes with these scraps and the squares, and it's just really a simple, easy pattern. Now, I originally made this quilt probably, I think it was about 4 years ago. I think it was during COVID that I made this quilt, and I made it in blues, where I had kind of seen the idea and went, oh, that's a real simple, easy idea, and I can use up some scraps with that. So I'll put a picture of that one up on the screen so that you can see what that looks like. So let's go over to the cutting table, and I will show you how simple and easy this pattern is and how quickly it goes together. Okay, here we're at the cutting table. And like I said, this uses 2.5-inch squares. And what I do, these are called leaders and enders, and they're just 2.5-inch squares to put together. And I use these in between when I'm working on a project and I'm sewing and I need to take it over to the ironing board. I'll put one of these through. And so I've got these all laid out, and I kind of try to have enough of them so that I end up with a stack like this. Now I've got this stack, and it'll make more squares. So these are leaders and enders. Now you accomplish 3 things with leaders and enders. The first thing, and probably the most important thing, is using these keeps your needle from pushing your fabric down into that throat plate, and it, making a mess out of your seams. So I use these a lot for just keep sewing, type of thing, and then I'll clip off what I'm working on and take it over to the ironing board and iron it. So I've got a lot of these that I've been working on, and these are what I've used for this project. So the second thing it does is you're working on 2 projects at once, especially when this is scrap, because you're just kind of pushing it through. You don't really need to think about it a whole lot. And then what I'll do is I'll start putting these together now and then make the bigger, longer pieces for this block. Real simple, easy way to use up scrap. And that's the third thing that it does, is you are using up your scraps. You're using up these to kind of keep them under control, because let's face it, scrap management is a full-time job. So the next thing I do is when I get an idea or something, I'll write it out, what I'm going to use, how I'm going to do this. Now this pattern originally came from Quilting is More Fun Than Housework. That's her website. Her name, I think, is Cynthia Bruns. This is where this idea came from, and that's, I followed her pattern the first time and did it in that blue turquoise combination, and I was pretty happy with the way it came out. So these blocks block A uses up 48 2.5-inch squares, and block B uses up 36 2.5-inch squares. So I write my sets out so that when I go to cut and I've got these blocks, they're already, I know what I need to do, and it just makes it easier. So the first block, this is block A, and it's, like I said, this is real simple, real easy. You're just sashing up that 4 patch, and then you're just adding 3 2.5-inch squares on this side. I believe this one's 5, you know, and this will all suck up with the seams. And then here's another, and then you're just sashing this. Oops. Now don't worry too much about your 2.5-inch squares being exact. I do trim them up a little bit just in case one is really, you know, kind of wonky or out of place. But most of the time I leave them because it's supposed to be scrappy and you really can't tell if it's too off. And then we have this one. And then this one. And then the last two. Now this is block A. And what I do is after I finish this, getting it all put together, what I'll do is I'll sew along the edge here at 1/8 of an inch, less than 1/4, because what I want to do is I want to stabilize this outside edge, because you don't know what type of grain, where you are with the grain of fabric, if it's biased or if it's whatever, especially since I didn't cut these squares. These squares were given to me. So you get a little bit of stretch. You can see how that stretches. I sew 1/8 of an inch all the way around. It kind of sets that edge for me so that when I'm putting it together with the other one, it goes together much nicer and you don't have that stretch to deal with. So this is block A. Okay, so let's lay out block B. Now block B starts with a 4.5-inch square in the center. And after you add your 2 patches on each side, and once again you're going to have this one, and then and then this one up here. So this is, now you're going to start adding your red sashing to these. You've got one here, and you've got one here, and this will go here and here. And now you're going to start adding your 2.5-inch squares. Now this one's going to end with the red sashing. So this is you're going to have this against those other 2.5-inch blocks from block A. So these just go all the way around. So those are all going to go all the way around. So you can see that it kind of finishes up really nicely. This one you don't need to do the 1/8 of an inch sewing on because it's got this sashing on it. And this sashing will go against that other block with the 2.5-inch squares on this side. Now this is simple, easy, real easy layout. Uses up a lot of 2.5-inch squares. But wait, I have another idea for you. Instead of using 2.5-inch squares, what if you took some of those lovely scraps that you have so much of and started sewing them together? Now I sewed this on what I call foundation fabric. It's fabric that I don't really care for or don't really like the words that are on it, so I'm covering it up with my scraps. And so I was kind of experimenting with, regular strips. Then I thought, oh, it needs some diagonal in there. So this is a really easy way. You could replace this with these 2.5-inch squares. You don't need to use those. You could use up your strips. So when I sew this on, then I'll trim this up and I can just measure what I need to put there, and then I can replace that with this. That's an easy way to use up more scrap. But wait, I have another idea for you. What if you took all of those lovely little half square triangles that you have, because I save these from all of my, when I cut my binding, I save these. And you could easily just start adding half square triangles all the way around. These are all 2.5 inch half square triangles, and you could just do that. Or you could do this. Or you could do, there are so many ideas that you could do for this. Don't feel limited to 2.5 inch squares. Use your imagination. Let's get some of these fabrics out, because look at this box of 2.5 inch or half square triangles that I have that and just all need to be sewn together. Now normally if I'm working on something, I sew these at the time. I'll draw my line and I'll sew on one side and then sew on the other and then cut this off and it's already done. That's one of those easy, fast ways to stay ahead of your scraps. So these are all just scraps that I have, and you know, quarter square triangles, you could use quarter square triangles. Pinwheels, I thought I had a pinwheel in here somewhere. Nope, not a pinwheel. Not a pinwheel. Pinwheels would be really cute along this edge too. You know, it doesn't have to be, oh, here it is. Here's a pinwheel. You know, that could be trimmed up to 2.5 inch squares, and you could line this with pinwheels. There's so many ideas that you can do, and it doesn't have to be done with 2.5 inch squares. You could do this with 3 inch squares. You could do this with 4 inch squares. It will just become bigger and grow more. But these are all simple ideas for using up this scrap that we have in this box. That's not doing any good in that box. So, simple idea. Don't be afraid to experiment with this. Try this. Go take a look at it. I recommend that you start with her pattern first. Do it first so you kind of get the idea, and then take it and try to make it your own. Personalize it to you. Simple way to use up scraps, but also, you know, start thinking about which way can I take this? Which direction can I go with this? This is a real easy pattern. So I hope this is interesting to you, because I find this fascinating. There's so many ideas out there for using up your scraps. But then when you start working on them, you start thinking about, well, what if I did this? Or, ooh, maybe I could try that. Just play with these ideas, because that's the mother of invention, is when you come across something and go, oh, isn't that interesting? So get those scraps out. Let's use them up, because they're not doing any good in the drawers or the box over there. So this is something that easily can be done. Like I said, leaders and enders. You could do these squares while you're working on another project. I love that idea because it's so simple. It's so easy to do. Bonnie Hunter, most of her patterns, her scrap patterns, are done with leaders and enders. That's the way she kind of designs quilts, is she starts putting things together and then it's like, oh, look at that. Look at this. Real simple ideas. So I hope you enjoy this. Please leave me a comment. What do you think? Is this a good way to use up your scraps? So thanks for watching, and please subscribe if you haven't. I do appreciate it. And leave me a comment. Let me know. I respond to them all. So until next time, keep quilting.